morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'm KT, and this is what happened. For our very first story on the channel, we're going to talk about Queen Esther. This is a story from the Bible. However, to understand Queen Esther, we first have to talk about another king and a queen. The king is King Osiris. I'm probably saying it wrong, but I know him as King Xerxes. So we're going to cover King Xerxes, and we're going to talk about his first queen, Queen Vashti. I'm going to separate the stories on this channel into sections. So section 1 is going to be called King Xerxes the Show Off. Let's get into Xerxes. During his time, Xerxes ruled over 127 provinces. That is a lot. He ruled from India to Ethiopia. Now, he had a queen at this time, Queen Vashti. Now, around year 3 of his reign as king, Xerxes decided to throw a giant dinner fest party. Now, you may ask how big this party was. Well, the answer is huge. He invited all of his officials and their servants. They were seated in order by the highest ranking to the lowest. So you had princes and nobles and servants. It just went on and on. And this party was so big that it lasted for 180 days. I mean, goodness, when did he take a break? 180 days of partying, and this was all to show off his riches, the land, the food, just everything that he had, right? He wanted to show it off, and what better way to do it than to invite the princes and nobles from all 127 provinces and show off for half of a year. Now, at the end of the 180 days, he threw a 7-day feast, and every man was at this feast, and it's important to distinguish every man was there. At the same time, you had Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti made her own feast, and she was serving the women, and this feast was in the royal palace, so she had a job and she was tending to her business, right, and serving her king. On the 7th day of this feast, which would be pretty much the last day of partying, and when he was good and drunk, King Xerxes summoned Queen Vashti. And I mean summoned. He sent 7 eunuchs. He had eunuchs in his service. He sent 7 eunuchs to go get her, and the mission was to bring her back. But he had some very specific things that he wanted. He wanted her to wear her crown and show her beauty. Now, I translate that to mean, girl, don't put on nothing else or dress real skimpy, but make sure you got that crown on, because I need everybody to see how you look. There are probably a lot of reasons why Vashti turned this down. I would think safety would be a thing. I mean, he's the king, but you got a room full of men. Like, who wants to do that with that many people? Because this ain't like 30, 40 people at the strip club. No, you got to remember how big this feast was. But either way, Queen Vashti refused. She was like, no, thank you. It's a hard pass. And the king was angry, to say the least. I mean, that's an understatement. Of the people he had at this feast, he had 7 princes. And he asked the princes what he should do, because I summoned my queen. I told her to wear this crown and to show her beauty, and she refused to come. What can I do about this? I have to take some kind of action. Why did he ask them? I mean, it was the way of the times, but let me tell you, this thing took on a whole new life after he asked them, because the princes, they get to clowning and whining and moaning, and they're like, this is bigger than her, because if the other wives know what she did, they're going to start talking back to their husbands. Their husbands are going to tell them to do stuff, and they're going to say, no, I'm not doing it. On top of this, they go down this whole rabbit hole like, you know, we need quiet women. We don't even want women that talk to us. God forbid, the women might actually want to talk to us, their husbands. And she's setting a dangerous precedent, right? We got to do something about it. It's got to be big, and it's got to be serious. So the genius idea that they came up with to keep other women from saying, Queen Vashti didn't listen to the king, so why do I have to listen to you, husband? You don't even have what the king has, husband. So to keep this from happening, they said that the king should issue a royal decree. And this decree would say that the queen can no longer come before King Xerxes, Queen Vashti specifically, and that her title would be replaced by someone else. So basically, like, you're not queen anymore, don't come before him anymore. Because in these times, coming before the king if you weren't summoned was a penalty, right? They could just end you there. In the end, King Xerxes agreed with this logic. So he summoned his servants to send out the decree. He put it in the king's name with the king's seal. He sent it out to all 127 provinces, and y'all, he put it in each language so there could be no misinterpretations. They figured that this way the women would get the point. Don't do what Vashti did. You got to do everything your husband says, and you do it blindly, okay? Because if the queen can get unseated and dethroned, wronged, then what can happen to you and your plain Jane husband? Or maybe it's a plain Bob husband. I don't know. You get the point though. But just like people who listen too much to other people's opinion and don't think things through, King Xerxes began to regret his decision pretty quickly because he missed Queen Vashti. She was beautiful and it seems like smart. He was really sad. Alas, the people around him had another genius idea. They saw that the king was sad and they had a solution. And that solution was, there are plenty of young, beautiful virgins all around your provinces. You've got 127, right? So why not go get someone younger, more beautiful, and quiet, because you don't want her talking too much, right? And then let's also get somebody who will do exactly what you say. You can get somebody better than Vashti. And Xerxes thought, well, okay, we can do that. That's a good idea. So they sent another missive out. This is another directive from the king. It was to identify all the beautiful women that were still young virgins and to collect them, basically. And we need to bring them to the capital. And the capital was Shushan. Also, I'm going to put all of the words that I'm probably pronouncing wrong on this screen so you can see what it is, okay? Let's roll on to the next section. Section 2, we're going to call it Mordecai-Holding It Down. Let's talk about Mordecai. The first thing you need to know is that he was Jewish. 3 generations before him, his family had been taken captive by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Now, that's a different story, and I'm sure that it'll land on our story block one day. We're going to stick to where we are with Mordecai right now. So what you need to know about Mordecai is that he raised his little cousin, Hadassah. I'm sure I'm saying that we're wrong too, but hey, y'all know the drill. Her name for this story is Esther, and that's what we're going to call her for the rest of this story. But I think it's important to put our real names out there because names have meaning. Hadassah was his cousin. Her father and mother were Mordecai's relatives, and they had passed away. But once they passed away, Mordecai decided to take her in, and he treated her as his own daughter. Now, everyone said that Esther was lovely. Not only lovely, but smart. So people that knew Esther liked Esther. Because she was beautiful and smart, she was swept up in the wave of women that were taken to the capital. Esther was taken to the citadel under the lead eunuch for the women, whose name was Haggai. Now, Haggai had been overseeing this project of finding beautiful young virgins, making them even more beautiful and presenting them to the king. This is where Esther landed. Right away, Haggai favored Esther, like he saw something special in her. I want to talk about what he did with them, but I need you to understand, from the time that they decided to collect the women to the time that the king picked someone, it was 3 years. That just lets you know how much Esther had to stand out to Haggai. She stood out so much that he gave her 7 maidservants just for her, and she got the best room in the women's house. Let's talk about the beauty treatments, because if you're bringing young women in, they're already supposed to be beautiful. What are you doing with them? Well, Haggai worked with them for 1 year. They came in groups and they would all stay under him for a year. Now, 6 months would be oil and myrrh, meaning we got to find the right perfume that smells best on you. The next 6 months were beauty treatments. So I imagine, you got a unibrow, honey. We got to get that plucked. We got to get you looking right. We're going to get you in these baths, soak you in these oils, get your skin soft, get rid of these pimples and dimples. I mean, baby, it was rough living back then. So they had to get them right, and it took a year to do it. And all of this, it is important to note that Esther had a secret, because when the people came to take her back to the palace, Mordecai was smart, honey, and he told her, do not tell anybody you're Jewish. Keep it to yourself. You're going by Esther. We're not going to go by your given name, honey. You need to keep it a secret to keep yourself safe. And during all this time, Mordecai was worried about his baby girl, okay? Do you think they just took Esther to the palace and you didn't hear from Mordecai? No. Mordecai would come and he would go into the front courtyard, because the palace was in sections. Because the king was in his sections, you had an inner courtyard or outer courtyard. I can't break the whole thing down to you because, again, I'm not a scholar in this. Your girl KT just likes to read. But Mordecai would hang out. He would hang out every day, so much so that the guards got to know him and the people around got to know him, and they would actually give him verbal updates on Esther. So Mordecai knew that Esther was doing well, she was healthy, and she was being treated nicely, and that meant the world to Mordecai. So he came every day to continue to get those updates on her. That's why I said Mordecai held it down. He was a real one, okay? Let's get back to it. After a year of these beauty treatments, the women could then go before the king. Now, this was the name of the game. The king never remembered the names of women. You went before him, you made your best impression. I can only imagine what all that entailed. If he remembered your name and called for you back, then you were the winner, okay? That's what we're gonna call it, the winner. When you left the women's house, you could take one item with you. Now, I can only imagine that some of these young women probably took things that were worth a lot, because what were the odds of you getting remembered by the king? So, let me take something that I can take home and maybe sell and put my family in a better position. But not Esther, honey. No. Esther decided to ask a guy. When he reminded her, like, you can take whatever you want, Esther was like, well, what would you advise that I take? Esther got her advice. She went before the king. And at this time, King Xerxes had been king for 7 years by the time Esther appeared before him. Esther had to go through the king's eunuch and be presented to him. And he liked her instantly, but he was a troll. So, he called her guy before him and he told him, like, your job is over. I've been looking at women for 3 years and I have not remembered one of them's name. So you don't have a job anymore. But really, it's because I like that Esther right there. She is so fine. She is going to be my queen. True to his word, the first time he saw her, he gave her the crown and he had a feast for her. And when I say a feast for her, baby, this man named the feast after her. It was called the Feast of Esther. He declared it a holiday in all 127 of his provinces. He gave gifts to every province. So everybody knew they were celebrating a new queen and they were celebrating Esther. So now we're back to Mordecai being a real one, because after Esther was selected and the feast was had, they gathered all the virgins back into the courtyard. And Mordecai was kind of hanging out there because, this is back then. We didn't have no way to get word before we heard. So he was just trying to see what was going on. While he was doing this, he overheard 2 of the king's eunuchs / guards. Their name was Bigthan and Teresh. They were so mad at him that they wanted to take the king out. So Mordecai overheard this and immediately decided to take action. Mordecai got word to Esther, because remember, Mordecai has made friends. Esther has made friends. So he got word to Esther. Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. She was like, hey, my king, this guy Mordecai heard that these 2 people, Bigthan and Teresh, are trying to get you bad. So the king launched an investigation and he found it to be true. He did what he needed to do. He hung them on the gallows. And after this, and this is very important, so stick a pin in it, he had the scribes to write down in the book of Chronicles that Mordecai saved King Xerxes in the year or whatever, because I ain't finna get into that because I don't know it by heart. So, and the king watched the scribe write it down. So, this is like knowing your written history, writing it down, because when you can't remember, you got to go back and read. So let's move on. With that, we're going to go on to section 3, Haman, the hater with access. To move this story along, we have to talk about Haman the Agagite. This is a new player in the story, so let's talk about who he is. Haman is a prince. He's one of the princes in the 127 provinces that the king runs. The king liked Haman. He found favor with the king. He liked him so much that he actually promoted him to the lead prince, is what I call it. Basically, he was to be looked at above all the other princes. I was going to say princesses, but you know what I'm trying to say, princes. So he's looked at above them. In addition to that, the king said when Haman comes in, anybody inside the royal gates, you have to bow to him and you have to pay homage to him. The only problem with this was Mordecai wouldn't do it because his faith did not allow for that. Some people came back, some servants, and told Haman, hey, that guy Mordecai that hangs around in the outer courts, but he's inside the gate? He doesn't bow to you. And Haman asked, why? Why won't he bow to me? And the servant said, because he's Jewish. He won't bow to you. The Jewish people won't bow to you. I felt like the servants were coming to stir some ish up, and they did it successfully, because even though this man had all the favor of the king, he was risen above everybody else that's a prince. He's also richer than rich. It bothered him. Baby, he couldn't stand it that this one man inside the palace gates would not bow to him. Just like any other hater, Haman started plotting. Y'all don't understand. This man wasn't just mad. He was filled with rage. And if you've ever seen this from somebody, it's disturbing, it's scary, but he just couldn't control how angry he was about Mordecai not bowing to him. That said, there had been fables and tales about the Jewish people. So Haman would not lay hands on Mordecai himself because he was afraid of what would happen if he did. People felt like the Jews were favored and he just didn't want any kind of wrath, whether he believed in the God or not, he believed that it could come back on him. So he would not touch Mordecai. That said, let's move on to the next section. We're going to call it the decree. Haman finally came up with a plan, and that plan was to trick King Xerxes. He could be tricked. It had happened before. He came at him like this. There's this group of people throughout your kingdom, and they don't follow your laws. They don't care that you're the king. They ain't worried about all that. They still not going to do what you say. The king walked right into the trap. He was like, what should I do? Haman said they should be destroyed. Let's write a decree. I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver to whoever does it to save you your money. We don't have to go into the palace coffers. I can pay that because Haman was rich. Another important thing to note is that Haman had the king's signet ring. So it's just as good as your signature. So when people saw that stamped into wax or sealant, then they knew that was the king's words. So Haman went on and wrote this decree, and also 10,000 talents of silver. I tried to find out exactly how much that was, but I think in today's time, on the low end, it's probably hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking about paying that out to people who harm another people. The king said, even without your money, you can use money from the treasury and do what you need to do. He was on board with this plan. He never asked who, what, how, where, why. He just went with it. It was the 13th day of the first month. It gave a deadline of the 13th day of the 12th month. So exactly 12 months away, or maybe that's 11, depending on how I sometimes don't count right. But anyway, it said that, hey, we're going to annihilate all of these people. Not only that, they can be young, old, women, and children. And if you get rid of them, you can take their possessions too, just to put salt in the wounds. It was ridiculous, y'all. It sounded like the Purge movies. Y'all watch those? That's what it sounded like. Like, we can just do this. Let's talk about the reaction of the Jewish people. I can only imagine there must have been a lot of fear, anger, rage. Why would the king do this? Because it was ridiculous and horrifying. But Mordecai himself put on sackcloth, which it was like a shirt made of goat's hair usually. Basically, you were looking run down, a little bit raggedy, like you were going through it. And that's what he wanted to look like, because he was in mourning. After he put the sackcloth on, Mordecai went to the king's gate. He wouldn't go in because you had these nuances, right? If you were dressed in sackcloth, you just didn't enter the court. But he went to the outside of the gate and he wailed and he mourned and he cried out. This was the reaction of a lot of the Jewish people. They wore the sackcloth. They fasted. They mourned. They cried out. I'm sure it was praying involved, of course. They wore sackcloth and ashes. Some people told Esther, because again, the palace talks. They were like, Esther, that guy you're always talking to, Mordecai? Because keep in mind, her true identity is still a secret. They don't know that is her cousin daddy. Not like that, but her cousin, but he raised her. So they don't know that. So they say, hey, that guy you're always talking to, Mordecai, he is outside dressed like trash baby. So she sent him some clothes because she really didn't know what was going on at that time. She had no idea about this decree that the king had allowed Haman to send out. So when the eunuchs bought Mordecai the clothes, he sent them back to Esther and told her, I don't need these clothes because the king is trying to take us all out, honey. And what I really need is for you to go to him and you need to ask him to save us. This is the time to reveal who you are. When Esther heard this, it's not that she had a problem with trying to advocate for her people, but again, just like not wearing a sackcloth in the gate, that was actually illegal. There were other nuances, serious ones. So one of them was, you do not go before the king unless he calls for you. If he does not call for you, you could be... So Esther had not been called in a month. He liked her, but he gets sidetracked because he's Xerxes, right? Esther decided she needed to meet with Mordecai. They had a little meetup and she told Mordecai exactly what I just said to you all. I could be taken out if I do this. And Mordecai said, well, baby, if you don't, the streets talk. Somebody's bound to find out you're Jewish. And when they find out and tell the king, you're going to be gone anyway. So this is hey, you got to pick what you're going to do. But Mordecai also told her this. And this is why Mordecai always hold it down. Mordecai said, whether you go to the king or not, the Jewish people are going to be saved because, baby, his faith was that strong, right? But he said, you are worried about being hurt when all your people are going to be hurt. But what if you were put here? Maybe God put you here just for this reason. And that's what he told her. Like, maybe that's the whole reason you're here, to save your people. And man, that's a big thing on her shoulders, right? I can only imagine. Esther thought about it, and what she ended up saying was, okay, I'm going to do it, but I need you to ask all of our our Jewish people to do some things. I need you to fast for 3 days. And after that, she is going to go to the king. It doesn't matter what her fate is. They did exactly what she said. All of the Jewish people in Shushan, that's the capital, they fasted for the 3 days. Esther and her 7 maidservants, she probably had more by this time, but they also fasted as well. Our next chapter is called Esther-That One. So at the end of the 3 days of fasting, Esther got all dressed up in her royal robes, and she stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace. He saw her. Now, he's on the inside of it, but he saw her because, baby, she was beautiful and she was standing out, and he extended his scepter to her. Because if you came before the king and he didn't call you and didn't extend that scepter out, you were a dandada. But no, he extended the scepter out, and she immediately went and put her hand on it. She had never shown up without him calling for her, and he liked that about her, so he knew that she wanted something. And he told her, "What do you request, my queen? Whatever it is, just ask and I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom." This is what that man said to her. But Esther was no fool, y'all. She knew how much he favored Haman, and she knew that she had to approach this carefully. Esther said, "My king, I have prepared a banquet. I just request that you and Haman attend the banquet." He said, "Hey, go get Haman." He told the servants, and they went immediately and got him, and they went to the banquet with Queen Esther. Now, once they were at this banquet and they were eating and the food was good, and the king said to Esther again, so I'm telling y'all this so y'all know this man was serious. He said, "What is it that you petition for? Like, what do you want, my queen? Because I will give anything to you, up to half of my kingdom." Esther said, "Well, this is what I'm asking. I'm going to prepare a banquet tomorrow. I want you and Haman to come, my king, if it pleases you." Because Esther was trained, baby. She knew what to do, and she always threw that "if it pleases you, my king" in. And she said, "When you come to the banquet tomorrow, I will then ask you what it is that I want." And so that was the end of the first banquet. And Haman left that banquet, baby. He was so excited because he felt really special. Because look, I got to be at this banquet with the queen, and the only people she asked to be there was the king and myself. He left the banquet, y'all. He was overjoyed, but then he passed by Mordecai, who didn't bow to him, and he got so mad. But he decided, like, I'm happy. I'm not going to say anything to him right now, but I'm going to come up with something for him later. Like, I'm going to get him. Haman went home, and he had his wife there, Zeresh, and he had his friends, and he told them all about the banquet. He was bragging, y'all. He's like, "Y'all know I'm rich. Y'all know I got that money. Y'all know I'm ahead of all the princes, and the king really likes me. But did you know that the queen invited just me and the king to a banquet today, and we get to go back tomorrow? I'm that one, pop my collar, shake my shoulders." Yeah, that was Haman. But he told them, there is one thing still that's a problem. You know, this Mordecai, he will not bow to me. I'm about to annihilate his people, and he is not scared. He's not shaking in fear. He's not trembling. Like, what can I do about him? So his friends came up with an idea, honey. And you know by now, when the people come up with an idea, it probably ain't nothing good, and it wasn't. His friend said, "Hey, you should build a gallows, 50 cubits high." Gallows is where you hang people from, okay? We've used it before in this story. Now, you should build it 50 cubits high. From my research, that seems to be about 75 feet tall. Yeah, that's like the actual pun intended definition of overkill. They said, in the morning, you should go to the king before the banquet and ask him to hang Mordecai from these gallows because he's giving you those problems. Once the king says yes and you get rid of Mordecai, you can just go happily along to the banquet. Haman thought it was a good idea. He said, "I'll do that." He ordered them to start building the gallows, honey, because you couldn't tell Haman nothing. I'm going to call our next section How the Tides Turn. We're going to move over to King Xerxes. This is the same night that Haman has done all the shenanigans with the gallows. And remember, in the morning, he's going to tell the king they should hang Mordecai. Well, that night, King Xerxes could not sleep. He was tossing and turning. He was flipping and flopping. So what did he do? He told his servants, "Go get the book of Chronicles and read to me." Because, you know, that'll make you go to sleep, right? Just read me some historical chronicles. So they came in, the servants, and they started reading to him. And sure enough, they got to the part where Mordecai had turned in Bigthan and Teresh for plotting to get the king. The king said, "Wait a minute," because the servant kept reading, "Wait a minute, how did I reward the man Mordecai?" And they read for it and said, "No, you didn't do anything for him." So he said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to write this because I should have done something for the man who saved my life." wife. The king said, who is here right now? Because by now it's the morning hours because he hasn't slept all night. They said, oh, Haman just walked in. I think he's in the outer court or something. Well, he said, well, go get Haman for me. They go get Haman. When Haman comes before the king says, hey, Haman, I have a question. What do you think should be done for the man who the king, myself, wants to honor? And baby, Haman just knew Xerxes was talking about him. So Haman goes, well, King Xerxes, I will get a robe. It's got to be a robe that you've worn, and then it can be draped around his shoulders. I will get a horse, but it's got to be a horse that you've ridden, and I will put the man on a horse. I would get a noble prince to lead him around by the horse. They're going to walk in front of the horse. They're going to proclaim out loud, this shall be done for the man whom the king delights in. And the whole time they walking, I'm like, hey y'all, the king delights in this man. And he just started up everything he could think of that will honor himself. The king said, oh, that's a great idea. Go get everything you spoke of. Don't leave anything out and do it for Mordecai. So baby, not you planning to get rid of somebody. Now you gotta go and honor them. And the king said, do it. So how you gonna get out of it? You can't. So baby, Haman went, and honey, he got the robe the king wore, the horse the king had ridden on, and he leads Mordecai out with the crown on his head, because I left that out. That was another one of Haman's genius ideas. Let's put a gold crown on his head. Mordecai was riding around on this horse with the robes on, with the crown on, and Haman was leading the horse. He probably didn't have all the oomph he needed to give. He was probably like, this is the man whom the king delights in. But you got to give some effort, because it's going to get back to the king. So this ate Haman up, because Mordecai was a humble man. He was doing what needed to be done, but he also had his faith where he felt like his faith needed to be. So you couldn't shake this man. After Haman led Mordecai around and exalted his praises on behalf of the king, he went home and he immediately went to Zeresh, his wife, and his friends, and he told them what happened. And they said, wait a minute, you did not tell us that Mordecai was of Jewish descent. It's already started to come back on you. The tides have already started to turn against you. We would advise that if you don't want to continue to fight, leave Mordecai alone, because you will not prevail against him. Maybe Haman's friends were wiser than I thought. Let's skip forward to the banquet. This is the feast. Haman's day has already started off in the trash, right? It was in the bin. So now he's trying to get his spirits back up, because he is excited to go to this banquet with Esther, because he's still feeling very rewarded and uplifted and honored, I guess is the right word, because she only invited him and the king. When they get to the banquet and they have eaten, King Xerxes says, Queen Esther, what is it that you want, lovely woman? Because I will give you anything up to half my kingdom. Make your request known, baby. Let me know what you want. He had them the words and the moves right now. Now he was a little foolish. So Esther knew this was the timing. And she said, if it pleases the king, would you spare my life and the lives of my people? Immediately, baby, save me, save your woman and her people. She told the king, my people and I are to be destroyed, to be taken out of this place, and for all of our stuff to be taken after that. Women, men, old, young, children. She broke it down for him. And the king simply said, who is he and where is he? Esther stood up and she said, Haman. Haman is my enemy. He is my adversary, and he wants to get rid of me. And baby, Haman was scared. He was like, oh Lord. He was probably calling the Lord he didn't even believe in. I don't even know what he believed in, but he was calling on everybody who he thought was listening, because he knew this has turned from the night before. Oh man, y'all. Okay. Baby, the king was big mad. He was so mad that he left the banquet and went out to the garden. Now, I think he was trying to calm down, but while he was doing this, Haman stayed behind with Queen Esther, and he was begging for his life. He was like, please, queen, please. I didn't know that was your people. I didn't know it's right to do this regardless of who people they are, but this the kind of person Haman was, okay? Haman the hater. It just so happened that when the king returned, Haman had fallen on the couch that Esther was lounging on. And so the king was like, oh, not only are you trying to take out my woman, my queen and her people, you gonna assault her too? What is up? And Haman was like, oh, no, I was just begging for my life. But baby, the king was done. At that very moment, because the palace talks, right? The servants came in and said, look, king, Haman has a gallows built 50 cubits high in his backyard, because they was messy like that, y'all. And the king said, you know what? Take him Mom. Boom. He said what he said. And so it was done. Let's go into our last chapter. And it was kind of hard to know where exactly to cut this story because there's so much in it, y'all. The name of this last section is called The Aftermath. In the aftermath, Haman was gone. Esther was given his house. And by his house, I mean his estate. By this time, she has now divulged that she's Jewish. She has told that Mordecai is her cousin who raised her. So basically her father. The king knows everything. He gave his signet ring that he had taken from Haman before he gave it to Mordecai. So now Mordecai had the authority of the king. And once he had that authority, Esther put him over the house of Haman. So yeah, he now was running his estate in his house. Esther then threw herself at the king's feet. She said, baby, there's something else I need. I need you to undo what Haman did because my people are still in jeopardy. If it pleases the king, because y'all know Esther know how to work this king, baby. In response, the king held his scepter out. Esther put her hand on the scepter. And this is again showing that her life is spared. And the king told her, you and Mordecai, y'all write whatever pleases you. You have my signet ring. You have my trust. He wrote out a decree. It said that Jewish people could gather to protect themselves. If anybody tried to harm them, they could protect themselves. If anyone tried to do them harm, their women or their children harm, they could protect themselves. And also if they tried to raid and loot their things, because you know Haman has said you could do that too. And he wrote it and sent it to all 127 provinces. He had it written out in all the languages so nobody could say I didn't know, I couldn't read that. And he had horses bought in that were bred for speed so that it could get there really fast, because keep in mind we're closing in on that 12th month by this time. After this decree went out, Mordecai went out in royal colors, that was blue and white, and he had the great gold crown on, just like when Haman had to parade him around. He also had like purple linen, I think maybe attached to the crown, not sure about that. When he went out into the capital city of Shushan, everyone rejoiced and they were happy. In the aftermath, a lot of people converted to his religion, some probably out of fear, some out of amazement that things had turned that far, but either way you had a lot of converts. So finally the 13th day of the 12th month came around, and some people had not got the word or pretended not to, but some people still attacked the Jewish people and they were conquered, like they were done away with when they tried, because the Jewish people had gathered and defended themselves. Now to top that off, the sons of Haman were involved in the mess and they were captured. Now at the end of this day, the numbers were brought to the king, like how many people were defeated, and that number was 500 plus the 10 sons of Haman, because another thing he always bragged about was how many children he had. The king told Esther again, honey, tell me what you want, name anything and I will do it up to half my kingdom. She said, can we do again what we did today? Let my people defend themselves. The 10 sons of Haman were put on the same gallows that Haman built. Mordecai was cheered, and other people like the governors, the princes, people in the 127 provinces helped the Jewish people, because some of them feared Mordecai's name, but others of them were in awe. The ones that feared him, it was because he was second only to the king. Remember, he had been uplifted and given Haman's spot, and even more than he had in certain aspects, right? And so people feared him like they feared the king. That's how Mordecai's story ended. That's how Esther saved her people. And now let's go into the final section, which is my final thoughts. I'm not here to talk about the religious aspects of it. I am here to talk about the story, because on this channel, when we do other history stories and when we do Bible stories, because we will do both, we will have a mixture over here. To me, there's always lessons in stories. There are several lessons in this one. Number one that I get, be careful building a gallows for someone else. And by that, I mean, when you put all your focus in trying to take someone else down, you are more likely to take yourself down. At the very least, you will not be moving yourself up, making yourself better, or elevating yourself, because you're so focused on someone else. Now, that is a lesson that I follow and one that I teach my children. Now, the other thing I learned is, honey, if you're in a leadership position, you have to be smart. You cannot just listen to every single person around you. Also, it's important to surround yourself with good people, smart people. Now, they may not agree with you all the time, and you don't need yes people, but you need people who, even if they're disagreeing with you, they're looking at the good of a whole, and they're advising you well, and then you have to be wise enough to know what advice to take and what not. The next thing I learned is that sometimes you got to hold your cards close to your vest, right? Because Esther held who she was not out of shame, but out of strategy, and Mordecai gave her that strategy, and then she whipped those cards out right when she needed to, and it played in her favor. If I had to choose another lesson, I would say that you have to be open to where you are and to stepping outside of your comfort zone and outside of your box. Esther did that, and hers was more than a comfort zone because her life could have been in danger, right? You can have a vision for yourself or not, right? You can have a goal, but you have to know when you should go off course, when you should try to go through this other door, because sometimes life presents opportunities or puts you in places you need to be. There are times where you might not want something, but you are put there for a reason. I've definitely experienced that in my life. I could probably go on and on. I must say this too, y'all. This is my favorite Bible story, and let me tell you, baby, the Bible can be informative, it can be ratchet, it can be crazy, right? It's wild, but this is like my favorite story in the Bible, and so I started with this one. We'll see what story we have next time. Like, we'll have history from different countries, we'll have a lot of things, but it'll be in my words. So really, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and until next time, remember, keep reading, be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye bye.